Guys, you know what I miss? Multi-animator projects. They still exist today, but not in the same way they did 10 years ago. If you're anything like me, you probably watched a ton of Warrior Cats or multi-fandom projects that were popular back in the day, and they kind of blew your mind. There's just something so inspiring about them. Knowing that these animations weren't made by big companies, but just young people who were passionate about the art they made was really cool to see. In the past couple years, I've been revisiting a bunch of my middle school favorite ones, and they still make me feel such a certain way. Part of it is definitely nostalgia, but I can't help and think there's just something so freeing and fun about these that isn't in a lot of the art I currently make. So, I decided to host my own, join a couple others, and research them. This video was originally going to be all about my experience hosting a map, and while I will talk about that later in the video, I ended up going down a rabbit hole of early multi-animator project history, and oh my god, I want to yap about it. So grab your Warriors plushies, get your drawing tablet, and let's dive into some niche internet history. Actually, before I fully get into it, I always get comments asking what I use to make my own animations, so here's the list right out of the gate. I use a mix of Davinci Resolve and After Effects to edit and composite. A good mobile replacement to those would be a Light Motion. To draw the frames, I use Procreate, and if you're interested in learning Procreate animation, there's a great class on it from today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning platform that hosts classes made by professional, renowned creatives, with topics that range from crafting, general art motivation, to, of course, animation. The class 2D animation in Procreate Dreams, hosted by artist Siobhan, is a really great introduction to the basics of the program. She goes over everything from brushes to the timeline mechanics, and even how to directly import art you draw from the Procreate illustration app, giving you the right tools and tips to go off and make your own animations. You may already know how to animate or even know the program this class focuses on, and that's all good too, because Skillshare has literally thousands of classes to offer, so they've made sure there's something on here for everyone. I know a lot of us artists spend maybe too much of our downtime doom scrolling, but replacing that time by picking up a new hobby with a Skillshare class is a great way to reinvigorate your creative motivation, and just your general spirit. The first 500 people to click the link in the description or scan the QR code will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So get it while you still can! Thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and now, let's yap about some multi-animator projects. There may be some of you watching who have no clue what a multi-animator project is, or just need a refresher, so let's cover the basics. A multi-animator project, more commonly abbreviated as MAP or MAP, is a volunteer-based animation project where a bunch of artists get together, chop up a song into parts for each animator to work on, and then stitch all the parts together to make a fully animated music video with different styles and animation types. They started as a way for young artists to collaborate and make animations of their emo cats and wolves, but since then, they've evolved into being a celebration of the medium of animation, and a really fun excuse to show off skills or animate something people don't usually get the opportunity to. Maps can have one or multiple hosts that help with communication and keeping the project on schedule, and usually all the participants have to do is communicate back with the hosts, and finish the part they chose. That's just the bare minimum though, the process usually ends up being a lot more collaborative. Another common thing with maps is that they usually have a theme to them. Some limit the color palette participants can use, some limit what you can draw to a specific fandom or original characters, and the most thorough ones will have an animatic that the animators have to follow, alongside character design sheets and background references. I really only see that with Warrior Cats maps though. Those people are freaking dedicated. For a specific example, the Hayura Kande map I hosted last year had a multi-fandom theme. So as long as you weren't drawing your own original characters, anything and any art medium was fair game. And it is so pretty because of it, guys. Look at my map, look at it right now. Another genre of map that I've been seeing a lot more of recently are reanimate projects. The host will choose a clip from a movie or TV show and split up the shots to be reanimated by different artists. Some people are really crazy and organize enough people to reanimate a whole episode or even a movie, which, by the way, if anyone is thinking of hosting one for My Little Pony, please hit me up. This category of map has been getting a lot more popular in the past couple years, but it's also been around for a while. Some of my favorite projects to see recently have been the Fantastic Mr. Fox Reanimated, and the Magical Mystery Cure one, to no one's surprise. I also participated in a reanimate of It's Over, Isn't It? From Steven Universe, and oh my lord, everyone in it is so talented, it makes me crazy. Now that we've all been refreshed on what a map is, let's get into where and when they came from. Before getting into this, it's worth noting I only paid attention to multi-animator projects that were on YouTube and still available to watch in the year 2026. Maps originated over a decade ago, and I'm not super tech savvy whenever it comes to using things like the Wayback Machine or just archival websites in general. So if I get any facts wrong or just miss anything in general, please let me know in the comments. I would love to learn more about this weird piece of internet history. I went into researching this with the assumption that multi-animator projects were just started by the Warriors kids with their edgy Paramore music and emo cats, so the origins would be pretty cut and dry. And while that's partially true, there's a little more to it than just that. The earliest I could find the term multi-animator project being used on YouTube was in a video uploaded by the user Ice Rosette with the title Project Map, uploaded on June 21st, 2010. To my surprise, it was not Warrior Cats related at all. It featured work made by 11 different artists, and as opposed to them animating different parts of the same song, they each chose 20 to 30 second snippets from different songs to make little AMVs of their characters. It's almost more like a map and an anthology combined rather than the definition I gave earlier, but I'm counting this video because it is the first time I see the map label being used in general. Another interesting tidbit I learned from this video's description was that maps derive directly from multi-editor projects, which are essentially maps, but instead of using your own animations, it's for anime and Disney editors. I grew up watching some of these projects too, but I was always under the assumption that MEPs were a derivation of maps, and not the other way around. And this led me down a rabbit hole. Searching for old MEPs made me come to the realization that a lot of the original multi-animator projects aren't called that, but instead use the label multi-editor project. MEPs usually use footage from pre-existing media, but at some point a certain section of MEP creators started adding rules to their projects that said participants could only use art or animations made by themselves. If you wanted to participate, you had to be able to draw, and this kind of MEP was picked up pretty swiftly by the art community. The earliest examples I could find of pre-map MEP parts like this were uploaded in mid-2011, and in the coming year after that, artist multi-editor projects were becoming a huge staple of both the Warriors and OC art community on YouTube. Not nearly to the extent that we'll get to a bit later, but it was clear that people were latching onto this concept. Nowadays, I feel like maps have a more professional and polished feel to them, but these initial iterations were clearly made by younger artists experimenting with digital art and editing for the first time. Most of them are very rough and very elementary. I'm sure if I showed you a clip of any of these out of context, you'd immediately know they were from the early 2010s. I unironically am still a huge fan of them. The community continued to use the term MEP for these projects pretty consistently until about mid-2012, whenever the term multi-animator project finally started being picked up. Other than the 2010 Project Map I mentioned earlier, the earliest I could find the map label being used in a video was in July 2012, though I'm sure it was creeping up in other videos before that. It's hard to find who exactly coined it. Maybe someone watched the Ice Rosette video and thought the term should be carried over to the thriving Warriors and OC MEP creators. But after the end of 2012, the community had pretty much made their full transition from being a subset of MEP creators to their own thriving multi-animator project community. We've finally picked up the phrase we know and love. As for the fandoms and topics of these videos in the first couple years, I wasn't wrong to think that most of them were going to be Warrior Cats, or at least Warrior Cats adjacent, but I underestimated how many original character ones I would find, usually because they were also cats. Finding map or MEP parts that featured humans or characters outside of these two categories were few and far between, but around the start of 2013 there was starting to be a notable amount of people drawing and animating humans. For a long time, the map community would continue to be dominated by cats and wolves, but as the community grew and shifted, so did the artists within it. As we make our way to 2015, there started to be a notable upgrade in quality whenever it came to map parts. We're still not on par with, like, professional 2D animators, but you could tell a lot of the community had improved whenever it came to anatomy, color theory, and lighting. It also seemed that animators were moving away from simpler video editors like Windows Movie Maker to more advanced applications that let them have more control. RIP my favorite video editor of all time. Windows Movie Maker, fly high, I miss you. All of a sudden, map parts weren't just being made by young people having fun with art and their internet friends. It started to be treated as a way to showcase skill and explore other things in art you don't otherwise get the opportunity to, and it makes sense. That being said, I don't think the map community ever lost the joy of creating and collaborating with people. The artists just started to get really good. We had prominent creators rising up like ginjaninjaowo, Northflowo, Whisker Moon, Firework Cat 25, Maple Spider, and Cola Cat in the Hat, just to name a few. Warrior cats were still dominating the scene, but popular media at the time also got a notable amount of multi-animator projects starting to rise up, not to mention all the OC maps that continued to thrive. This is also where I finally started watching the map community through some of the Gravity Falls and Undertale projects that were popular at the time. So though I feel a little more familiar with this era than previously, it's starting to get so vast I feel like I'm barely able to summarize it all for this video. As the artists and community continued to grow and improve their skills, it really started to feel like it was cementing itself as a great hub for younger artists to gather inspiration and practice animation. Because a lot of these creators were still in school, that also meant they had more free time to animate, and the amount of map content being made only grew and grew as the views climbed. In 2016, this is where things really started to blow up for the map creators. The animation meme community had started to take off in a huge way, and with this new wave of animators and an even bigger wave of eyes on them, came the exponential growth of multi-animator projects with it. I haven't mentioned animation memes so far because they have their own separate history and community, but it's always gone hand in hand with the map community. They're like siblings. Around this time though, it really felt like the two communities started to merge. People who were blowing up from other animation content they were making hosted their own maps, and that only meant that more people were being introduced to the concept. For example, back in the day, the average Sugar viewer may only watch animation memes or story times, but since she took the opportunity to host a map, she introduced the concept to a completely different and new audience. It wasn't like maps weren't popular in any way before, they've always had a dedicated fan base no matter the fandom. But it started to become a lot more common for these videos to reach the hundreds of thousands and even millions of views range no matter the uploader's initial popularity. Getting into these projects, especially if you could participate in a lot of them, was a great way to market yourself and get your name out into the artist community. I remember finding some of my favorite artists just by recognizing their styles in multiple maps. Map creators in 2016 and beyond stayed winning. From this new wave of viewership and the ever-changing art scene that was happening online, the looks of maps started to change as well. If you've watched any video about online art in the 2010s, you've heard this spiel before. With the popularity of cartoons like Steven Universe, Voltron, and Adventure Time reaching their peak, the rougher, darker palettes of the early 2010s were switched for brighter, more pastel colors. Sharp eyes and rough edges were replaced with circles and rounder shapes. Edgy Warrior Cats maps and vent animations were still commonplace, but a brand new wave of more lighthearted and energetic maps started to take center stage, usually featuring original characters or fandoms besides the Angry Cat one. And if you were in the Angry Cat one, you had a whole load of spoof maps to enjoy. Thank you, Northflowo. These were my favorite. There were always exceptions to this. Some people didn't go along with this stylistic change. I just think it's fascinating. You can usually tell what year a map came out based on the general art and editing style. Also, I feel like I'd be remiss to not mention that some of these fandoms had specific catified maps too, like where the artists can only draw the characters as cats. I just needed this fact to be out there. 2017 and 2018 were a direct continuation of 2016. It started to feel like there was this overwhelming hype and prestige starting to gather around certain projects and creators, unlike the community had ever experienced before. This change really started to be seen in the Warriors community specifically. Around when maps initially blew up, Warrior Cat's projects have always felt like the gold star standards for what a map can be. Making character designs and general background rules have always been a thing with Warriors maps, but we started to see a lot more projects that were boarded and intricately planned out from the beginning. These artists had also grown in their character design skills, making the visual language of the cat characters go beyond just basic shape theory and different colors. They had different body types, vastly different shaped faces, and there was so much more emphasis pushed on giving cats unique body language. And the compositing and colors! Oh, we have moved so far past Windows Movie Maker! In less than 10 years, the Warriors map community went from making videos that were MS Paint slideshows of cat drawings to works that rival industry animations. Actually, insane. I feel like every artist who watched these masterpieces just felt more inspired to make their animations and map parts better, and as a result, a lot of people in the community pushed themselves beyond their limits. Even with the changing art scene and the slowdown of animation memes in 2019, the map community was staying strong and continued to provide a good outlet to young creatives wanting to draw and find community. I've been focusing on the improvement of the overall community just so much though, and I think it's important to remember that for every ready as I'll ever be and everything moves, there were probably 20 other maps being created by younger, less experienced artists out of their genuine passion and drive for animation. Even with the projects that weren't as technically impressive for the time, there is still something so fresh and charming about them. They're really inspiring to watch in their own way. Not to mention, a lot of these younger artists have grown up to be incredibly talented like the map creators they were inspired by. And I'm gonna end the history lecture right here. We've covered the 2010s, and though the map community still exists to this day, map history in the 2020s isn't nearly as eventful. Frankly, I'm also just tired of the 2020s, so I'm not going to talk about these years for my own mental sanity. I want to get through a contemporary art lesson without mentioning COVID. Please and thank you. However, I did host my own map last year, and I want to talk about my personal experience with hosting one, because I think it ties all of this history together. If you haven't noticed, a lot of the artists who grew up on these maps and memes are now a lot of the same people working on their own animated projects like short films or pilots. Despite that and the resurgence of animation memes, maps have kind of fallen by the wayside. But I think we need to bring them back, especially if you're an artist who wants to direct their own animated work one day. If that's you, then I say, host a map. It's an amazing exercise in project management and working with other artists and animators without having the stress of money tied up in it. I currently don't have the ambition to direct an animated project of my own, but I would love to help produce and organize someone else's. So hosting my own map was a really good way to dip my toes into that world. It's also why a lot of current professional 2D animators have their origins in the map community. As a multi-animator project host, you're not only participating in a map and choosing the song, you're having to manage a group of like 20 to 30 animators, making sure their pieces get done on time, talking to them one-on-one about deadline conflicts, and filling in gaps whenever someone inevitably drops out or ghosts you. Good communication is key if you're the head of a project and want to get it done, and I for sure learned that. My map Hayura Kande went through the typical trials of a multi-animator project. A few people had to drop out, I had to push back the deadline several times, not just because other people weren't finished, but I was actually one of the last people to finish their part. Even with all those issues, I was lucky enough to have everyone who participated be good communicators, and by the time I set the final deadline, everyone was dedicated to it and got their parts done. When I uploaded it to YouTube and the premiere was starting up, a lot of us hopped in a call to watch it together, and I heard from other participants that they were in other calls watching it with their friends. Sitting together and getting to see the final project for the first time with all these people I've spent months working with was just so exciting and fulfilling. And a few weeks later, when I got back to school from winter break, someone in the animation club I helped run said that they were there for the premiere of it too! Like, the community you get from hosting and joining these sorts of projects is really unmatched. As I was writing this video, I reached out to the map participants to ask them if they wanted to share anything about their experience with Hayura Kande, and I got quite a few responses. Some people told me that they used the map as an excuse to push themselves artistically. They came into the map without much of an animation skill set and came out the other end with a more productive look on art. Some people just used it as a fun excuse to draw characters they wanted to and were happy to contribute to something that other awesome artists were in. But in nearly every response I got, they talked about the community and the people you get to meet whenever working on these projects, and I could not agree more. They're a really fun and authentic way to network and connect with other artists. Getting to see people's works in progress, having a group of people you can reach out to if you're having trouble with something, and the sense that we want each other to succeed, it really leads to a positive outcome and experience. If you feel like you're needing to take a step forward to improve your art or just connect with other people online, multi-animator projects are a really great way to do that. And that's definitely why they stayed popular for so many years. If enough people want it, I could make a video on my tips for hosting your first map, but in the meantime, I'd recommend watching the do's and don'ts of hosting maps by Northflowo. This was essentially my map host bible and really helped me go into this project with a clear idea of what to do. They also have a version of this for map participants, which I found really helpful. I'll also have a link in the description to my map, as well as a Google spreadsheet of all the parts and maps I featured in this video. Full transparency, when I release this video, it won't be completely finished. I had an upload deadline to meet and some overlapping schoolwork, but in the coming week, I'll find time to finish it, so if you're watching this in the future, it should be up to date. I also want to give a big thank you to my $10 patrons, Eileen Nelson, Mac, and Cookie Cutter, as well as my other patrons for helping to make my videos possible. And another quick thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. All my other socials are linked in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.